Well, it seems that Canada's top story of 2023 might have been a little bit of the old fake news. Okay, maybe not fake news, just mildly exaggerated for political purposes. No, just fake news. Viva Frei, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler in my home office for another vlog. You all might remember the stories of the year coming out of Canada. Forest fires galore, all of which needed to be chalked up to climate change. From CTV News, June 2nd, 2023, wildfire season linked to climate change, scientists. From CTV News, June 8, 2023, experts say wildfires make climate crisis impossible to ignore. From Global News, August 22nd, climate change made Quebec fire weather twice as likely, study finds. We had record forest fires out of Nova Scotia, forest fires out of Quebec, forest fires that were so bad they were actually polluting the air of New York, and once again everybody in America was blaming Canada.
Millions of Americans are on alert, being urged to stay indoors, as much of the Northeast is experiencing the worst air quality on record since 1999. The National Weather Service issuing air quality alerts, stretching west to Ohio and as far south as the Carolinas and Georgia.
Rain Canada! Rain Canada! It seems that everything's gone wrong since Canada came along. Rain Canada! Rain Canada!
They're not even a real country anyway.
And at the time, the media was just jumping all over the story because these forest fires burning across Canada, across Nova Scotia, across Quebec, why they have to be the result of climate change, the climate crisis. They are evidence of the climate crisis. And my goodness, politicians, pundits, fake news media out of Canada did not waste a heartbeat jumping on that narrative. From Leah Proud Lakota, who's a she-her, she's an MP for Winnipeg. This is not normal. This is what hashtag climate emergency looks like. We need hashtag climate action now. From Jonathan Wilkinson, the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Wildfires have always occurred across Canada, but what is new is their frequency and their intensity. The science is clear. The root cause of this fact is climate change. Heck, even President Joe Biden, who doesn't know what room he's in, chimed in on this. We've deployed more than 600 U.S. firefighters to support personnel and equipment to support Canada as they respond to record wildfires, events that are intensifying because of the climate crisis. Now, forget the fact that they were blaming these forest fires on climate crisis. Literally at the exact same time, they were blaming the exceptionally wet season in Quebec and Nova Scotia on climate crisis. So you have simultaneously the wettest conditions the provinces have been experiencing in a while, leading to landslides, flooding. At the exact same time that despite this record wetness, there's also record dryness leading to record forest fires. Don't make it make sense, because it can't make sense except in that all roads lead to climate crisis. Now, after months and months and months, and I mean literally months and months and months, they ran with this story from early summer until the end of the year. After running with this story that all these forest fires were the result of climate crisis, it turns out that the record-breaking fire in Nova Scotia, arson. It turns out that a number of the fires in northern Quebec, arson. From The Guardian, Canada, Nova Scotia man charged with starting province's largest ever wildfire. Dalton Clark Stewart, 22, accused of lighting Canada's Barrington Lake fire, which burned for 1 month in 2023, January 18, 2024. A Nova Scotia man has been charged for allegedly starting the eastern Canadian province's largest ever wildfire. The charges against Dalton Clark Stewart, 22, come only days after a Quebec man, inspired by conspiracy theories, pleaded guilty to 14 charges of arson after deliberately lighting forest fires. What is truly astonishing in all of this, media has become living parody. They literally use the exact same photo they ran with the stories that it was climate crisis when running with the story that it was actually arson. And then if you click through the hyperlink to the Quebec man who was inspired by conspiracy theorists to commit arson, check that article out. Canadian man who claimed wildfires were a federal conspiracy admits arson. The country saw record-breaking blazes during the summer, and Brian Paré pleaded guilty to lighting more than a dozen fires. A Canadian man who claimed forest fires were the result of government conspiracy has pleaded guilty to lighting more than a dozen blazes during the country's record-breaking wildfire season, as nearly 100 fires persist in drought-stricken regions. Brian Paré admitted to 13 counts of arson and 1 count of arson with disregard for human life at the courthouse in central Quebec, an act that drew away key firefighting resources from nearly 700 fires in the province last summer. Well, isn't that convenient, diverting the resources of firefighters because they are in fact limited resources? You know what else diverts the resources of firefighters? Firing or causing the resignation of firefighters en masse because of COVID vaccination policies, because that also happened during the last couple of years. From CBC News, former Fredericton firefighter who resigned over COVID vaccine policy sues city. From the Toronto Star, unreasonable for Toronto to dismiss firefighters over vaccine status, arbitrator says. Another one from CBC News, this former Windsor firefighter lost her job for not disclosing her vaccine status. And finally, Calgary firefighter who quit in protest over vaccine mandate has case tossed by Labour Board. Firefighter resources were allegedly so depleted during this allegedly record-breaking forest fire season in Canada that Canada was forced to bring in firefighters from South Africa. We've all seen the video. It was a feel-good moment until you realize that it resulted from utter government incompetence. The government implements policy that results in the firing or resignation of firefighters. They allegedly have a record-breaking forest fire season, which, as we're going to learn later on 6 months down the line after the stories have already hit the news, is the result of arson. We're lacking firefighters allegedly to such a degree that we need to bring in firefighters from foreign countries. My goodness, leave it to the government to screw things up so badly. But the problem is this, it's not just that we are only now learning that the record-breaking forest fire season in Nova Scotia, Quebec, and Canada, the record-breaking forest fires in these provinces were the result of arson. I said it jokingly. Well, now they're going to have to spin the narrative. You know, at the same time, they were saying it's record-breaking rainfall leading to landslides and floods, while simultaneously saying climate crisis is causing forest fires. We knew that they had to somehow make that circle peg fit in the square hole, and they were going to somehow do it. Yeah, well, you see, it's record-breaking rainfall in certain areas, but record-breaking drought in other areas within the same province. Yeah, okay, if you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. I said it jokingly. Now that it's been determined that the record-breaking forest fire in Nova Scotia was the result of arson, I said humorously, well, now they're going to have to say, sure, it was arson, but it was made so much worse by climate crisis, and lo and behold, parody has become reality.
I would say that it's always sad, and I would say also very infuriating to see that people are lighting up fires in the boreal forest on purpose. Of course, that's very sad. This happened, but of course, the conditions, the weather conditions were very, very fire conducive this year. And so notwithstanding the cause of the fire, if it's an arson, if it's a accidental fire, human caused fire, or natural fires, conditions have to be very conducive to have the kind of fires that we had this year. Saying that the climate change was not involved in those fires, even if they are arson, human cause, or natural, is kind of intellectual dishonesty, I would say. And it has been already proven that those conditions that happen in Quebec were at least twice likely to occur because of climate change. So yeah, that's very important to say.
Yeah, for those of you who might have had trouble understanding what you just heard, the man, the expert on CTV News, is coming out and saying, yeah, regardless of the cause of the fires, arson, man-made activity, whatever, regardless of the cause, it's made so much worse by climate crisis, so we really need to focus there. According to many, the government implements forest management policy that exacerbates forest fires, implements COVID policy that results in the firing or the resignation of firefighters, and then you have arson that in some cases gets out of control. And what does the government do with it? A, it milks it for lies in the early days, and then B, it morphs it nonetheless into pursuing its climate crisis agenda at all costs, despite all reality. That is the latest coming out of Canada, but if you were to ask the elitist folk in Davos who are attending the WEF there what the biggest issues are over the next coming years, it's combating disinformation and misinformation, which means suppressing free speech so they can get away with pushing these bogus narratives.
For the global business community, the top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation.
But don't worry, the WEF is some useless conspiracy theory. They're not actually meeting at Davos to determine how the world should live. They're not actually implementing the Great Reset. They're not actually implementing Agenda 2030. And they absolutely don't have any influence whatsoever over the governments of the world that they have penetrated, including Justin Trudeau's cabinet and Chrystia Freeland, who is on the board of trustees of the WEF. Make that make sense. And not to toot my own horn, but I do recall being one of those pesky conspiracy theories theorists at the time saying, I'm hearing from a lot of boots on the ground, reading in smaller publications, stories of people being arrested for arson, despite all of these MSM articles about climate crisis, calling people who are suggesting that conspiracy. I do recall being one of those people also saying it seems very suspicious that all of these forest fires are starting at the exact same time, especially in light of simultaneous articles about record-breaking wetness in Quebec and Nova Scotia. I was one of those people. And lo and behold, I am right. Righter than CTV News, righter than Global News, righter than the CBC, righter than the state-funded propagandists, and I'm proud of it. And with that said, if you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. Viva Frei on Rumble, Viva Frei on Twitter, vivabarneslaw.locals.com on Locals. But most importantly, get out there, talk to people, exercise, eat healthy, get some sunlight, and now you know your vlog. Peace out.